All right, so there is a big difference between an optic and a scope. Now, out on the range or even in some of these forums, you're seeing optic and scope used as synonyms, but they're not, okay? An optic is not magnified, where a scope is. Whether it be variable or fixed, it doesn't matter. If it's a magnification, then it's a scope. Now, we have different types of optics, but nonetheless, an optic is not magnified. All right? So just clarifying that before we get started here. So, you know, if you're one of those guys that gets irritated, kind of like me, when someone says, I put the clip in the gun, when it's a magazine, because clips go in your hair. So, this is one of those same things, right? So it's not a scope, it's an optic. All right, so within the red dot family, we have a wide array of differences. And so it was, the other day I was in one of those big box stores, right? And there seems to be a lot of different products that are red dot in nature. And it's kind of difficult, if not confusing, about which one you should choose. So you've put a lot of time and effort and energy into selecting the AR or AK that you're using, and now you want to enhance what you already have with a better aiming device, as you should. So which one should you choose? What does some of the things on the boxes mean? You know, when they're talking about MOA, and does it require a battery? And if so, what type of battery? How does it mount? You know, there's a lot of different things that go into it. And, you know, if you're just starting out and you're trying to do it on your own, oh man, I feel you. I get it. Okay, so looking at some of the different guns that I've got on the table here, there are several different types of optics, and there's a scope. So the scope, obviously, right here, is being utilized in a magnified way so that, well, this is actually my coyote hunting gun. So I've got a nice scope on here. It's tuned to the bullets that I'm going to use. But what if that coyote comes in a little close? Well, what I've done is put a 45-degree mount right here and put a red dot. It's a small red dot. It has a very small field of view. And when we talk about field of view, that means when your eyeball is looking through the glass that has that magical, mystical red dot on it, it's not very big. So this has a very small field of view, but I'm already in that mode of tracking what I'm going to shoot. And I've made the decision to switch from a magnified scope to an unmagnified, non-magnified aiming device, which we'll call this an optic. With this type of optic running at a 45, then that means I have to cant the gun and do some other stuff with it, but it gives me a better aiming device. I'm using this optic in conjunction with this scope, and it's a specific configuration that I wanted when hunting that specific animal. Now, if I'm using a gun for personal defense, home defense, vehicle defense, whatever it may be, maybe I'm using it as a patrol rifle as an officer or in the military, then I may want something a little bit different. Well, now you have, say, an EOTech, or you may be looking at an aim point. Red dots, both, yes. Field of view, big difference. The EOTech is a lot bigger in that width is what I'm talking about, a lot wider, so I can see more, where the aim point's a little bit smaller, but I still have a decent size field of view, but I need to be up on the gun and be about my business. Both do the same job, both give you a red aiming indicator, which would be a dot, and both can be zeroed at the same. So it's kind of, what do you want? And you've heard me talk before about guns. My whole concept, just the way that I look at guns is it's merely a tool. So let's decide what we're going to do with said tool, or why we need said tool first. Then we can go about picking the gun, the optic, the bullets, and all that other stuff that goes with it. But as you probably already know, that's not the case. You know, Tom, Dick, or Harry runs down to the gun store because he saw something cool in a magazine, and he buys this new, boomstick right here. And then later on, as either funds are available or his knowledge or a new magazine article comes out and he sees something cool, he wants to go get that piece of Gucci gear and put it on his gun. And so we always try to back in the accessories into the gun, right? Shouldn't really be that way. It should be, what do we want to shoot? So we need to know what bullet we're going to use. Then we find the gun that shoots that bullet the best for that reason and that capacity. And then we get an aiming device that allows us to do that quicker or more accurately. But in this case, we're talking about red dots, so we've kind of already gone past the fact that you know what bullet you want to use, you know what gun you're going to use, regardless of how you got there. So with the EOTech or the aim point, they are red dot premier rifle optics. So it doesn't really get any better than the EOTech or the aim point, and either one I'd put my life on. Scope, magnify, right? Red dot, not magnified. Well, what about this Trijicon ACOG 4x32? It is a magnified fixed field of view. It is 4 power. It has its purpose, it has its place, and there's certain pros and cons with it, but it is considered an optic. Why? I don't know, because it's magnified. So that we're going to just leave that as the hybrid, leave it alone, and I'm not going to argue with it, and I don't have to be the absolute authority on this. But the Trijicon 4x32 ACOG, okay, that's what it's called, ACOG, ACOG. The Army started using those really in OIF-1. You really saw a lot of use of that. And it gave them a longer field of view for engaging targets, especially when you were fighting street links, city block links on the initial invasion. The problem is when you hit a house with it, your eye has to be so close to the optic so you can really see the big circle inside of it that it kind of wasn't really what the guys wanted for a CQB, a close quarters battle engagement optic. But rooftop to rooftop, down the street stuff worked great. So we started seeing the ACOG 4x32s kind of trickle out of service and then move more into a designated marksman's role, an overwatch role. So we started seeing the EOTechs more on the grunt guns, the guys who are going to kick in the doors and see the enemy eye to eye and do God's work with them. Because the wider field of view, the simplistic in the aiming device, and you could use both eyes. Yeah, you could use both eyes, keep both eyes open, and you can see the red dot as soon as it's over the target. You need to do what you need to do. So with the EOTech, you see a lot of those on the military guns. Why? Because the wider field of view, you'll see a lot of aim points on civilian rifles because you don't really need that wider field of view, but you also see EOTechs on civilian rifles as well. So see how you can kind of have just a little bit of whatever you want. I mean, it really is a buffet when it comes to optics, but it goes back to you. What do you need it for? What would you want it to do extra outside the need? And does it fill that capacity? Way early on in say OIF-1, Trijicon had this red dot over here, and I say red dot because that's what we're talking about, red dots, but it's actually orange. And it doesn't need batteries because it uses sunlight, and then it has tritium inside of it. So the problem with that is you can't adjust the intensity of the dot inside. So for that one, it's an orange dot, but we'll just call it red dots again. You can't adjust the intensity. So if it's really good, say dusk and dawn, and then during the full sun, you can make it out. But then when you went into a room and the sunlight's not there, or you're fighting at night, it got to be too bright. So the guys wanted something that they could actually, adjust the intensity on. And with the EOTech and the aim point, they have varying degrees of how bright that dot gets. Well, the brightness of the dot plays a big part in understanding, will this optic accomplish the goal that you're trying to accomplish? Because the bigger the bright red dot, right, then it's going to cover more of the target. So our accuracy may slip. So being able to adjust that intensity, I can turn that red dot down a little bit, and actually I can see maybe the shoulders of the guy or the waist of the guy and try to make a more precise hit. So again, you have different options out there, and you may see something on eBay and you go, oh, it's a good enough price for me. I like it. Yeah, well, will it do what you want it to do? So levels of intensity, not able to change over here on this Trijicon. May not be a problem for you. Wider field of view on the EOTech, maybe what you want. Aim point, very simplistic in nature and has like 11 degrees of intensity on it. So you can reach out there and do some precision shots with it, should that's something you want to do. All of these optics are extremely reliable. Again, the EOTech is what the military uses, so you know that it's ruggedized, you know that it's been through all the environmental testings, and it's passed the DoD standards. So it's got to be good for us, right? I'm not going to argue with DoD standards. Aim point, I've been running aim points, especially the H1 and the T1s, for many years now. They have not failed me yet, and I'm pretty brutal on them, dropping them on rocks and concrete and stuff, and they've still held their zero. So I personally can attest to their quality. Very, very good optics for you if you choose to go that route. In selecting a red dot, you've got to make sure that it's going to sit the right way, and we're going to go over that here in just a second. But know the difference between an optic and a red dot, and then look at the red dots that you have available for purchase and see what will it do for you. Also, the MOA on the box. When you see the box, there's going to be some differences. Obviously this is an EOTech, and this over here is an EOTech. But what's the difference? It could be that the housing is smaller or larger. The batteries that it takes are different. But it could be that the MOA is different as well. So MOA, minute of angle. How precise of a shot can you make with this red glowing dot? And we'll go over that here in a little while. So magnified, not magnified. Now you know the difference between the optic and the scope. If you didn't, awesome, you did. Great. We're all on the same sheet of music. So now when I start talking, you're going to understand where I'm coming from. All right. Well, now we need to start talking about selecting a red dot.